At the edge of a dry plain, beneath layers of wind-blown sand, a stone tablet lies, broken in two. Its surface is scarred, the symbols partially worn away, but one detail remains unmistakable. A royal seal. No palace stands nearby. No statue marks the spot. The king who ordered this tablet carved is not remembered by name in classrooms or documentaries. Yet the authority it once represented was real, enforced, and widely recognized in its time. Across the ancient world, power often left traces that were never meant to last. Kingdoms rose along rivers that later shifted course. Capitals were built from mud brick that dissolved back into the earth once abandoned. Records depended on scribes, languages, and political continuity. When any of those vanished, so did the memory of the ruler behind them. What survives instead are gaps. Long stretches of history where governance clearly existed, but the figures at the center are missing. These gaps pose an uncomfortable challenge. If power shapes societies so deeply, how could its holders disappear so completely? The answer lies not in insignificance, but in fragility. Ancient kings ruled without the guarantee of permanence. Their legacies depended on successors who chose to preserve their names, priests who continued their rituals, and cities that remained occupied. When those chains broke, history moved on without them. In some regions, forgotten kings governed during periods of stability rather than crisis. Their reigns lacked dramatic collapse or legendary conquest. They focused instead on irrigation systems, trade regulation, and border agreements. These were not stories that later chroniclers found compelling. Over time, the memory of steady governance faded faster than tales of chaos and war, leaving behind the impression that little of importance occurred. Elsewhere, rulers were deliberately erased. Victorious dynasties rewrote official histories to legitimize their claim to power. Names were removed from king lists. Reliefs were recarved. Entire reigns were reduced to silence. The absence was intentional, a political act that outlasted the conflict itself. What modern historians encounter is not a lack of kings, but the success of historical erasure. Yet evidence resists disappearance. A city wall repaired multiple times across decades suggests continuous authority. A standardized system of weights implies centralized control. Treaties referenced indirectly by foreign powers hint at rulers whose influence extended beyond their borders. These clues reveal kings who managed complexity rather than spectacle, whose authority rested on administration, not myth-making. The forgotten kings were not anomalies. They were common. For every ruler remembered by legend, dozens governed quietly, maintaining order in an unpredictable world. Their power was measured not in monuments alone, but in endurance. The ability to keep societies functioning across generations. That endurance shaped patterns of settlement, law, and governance that later civilizations inherited without attribution. To uncover these rulers is not to romanticize them. It is to confront a broader truth about history. Remembrance is selective, but influence is not. The ancient world was built not only by those whose names survived, but by many whose authority is now visible only through what they left behind. And as those traces surface, they raise a question that lingers beneath every excavation and inscription. How much of the past has shaped the present without ever being remembered? The story of ancient kings begins not with conquest or coronation, but with the very land they governed. Long before empires solidified and borders stabilized, river valleys, plains, and highlands were home to communities navigating survival, trade, and social hierarchy. These early societies relied on seasonal harvests, coordinated labor, and emerging political structures to sustain themselves. Into this world stepped rulers whose authority was not assumed, but built, sometimes through negotiation, sometimes through force, and often through a combination of both. In Mesopotamia, along the fertile banks of the Tigris and Euphrates, city-states grew into bustling centers of commerce and religion. Kings there were simultaneously military leaders, temple patrons, and lawgivers. Their decisions affected every level of life, from grain distribution to legal judgments, shaping social norms and the rhythm of everyday existence. Some rulers expanded their influence through alliances, while others relied on armies to impose control, yet all left tangible traces in clay tablets, inscriptions, and monumental architecture. Further east, along the Indus Valley, urban centers with grid-like streets and sophisticated drainage systems point to organized governance that required oversight and planning. Though few names survive from this region, evidence suggests rulers coordinated large-scale construction and trade, balancing resource management with the pressures of a growing population. These leaders may have lacked the dramatic conquests of Mesopotamian monarchs, yet their impact on urban life and societal stability was profound. In Egypt, kingship took on a symbolic as well as administrative role. Pharaohs were seen as intermediaries between gods and people, combining spiritual authority with temporal power. Tombs, temples, and extensive bureaucracies reinforced their presence across the Nile Valley. Even when their reigns faded from popular memory, the infrastructure and cultural practices they established endured, shaping society for generations. Their forgotten peers, lesser-known dynasts, similarly influenced local administration and religious practices, though history remembered them less vividly. Beyond the great river valleys, smaller kingdoms and tribal polities thrived across deserts, mountains, and coastal regions. These rulers managed trade routes, negotiated alliances, and defended territories against rivals. In the absence of enduring monuments, their reigns often survive only in fragments, pottery inscriptions, remnants of fortifications, or mentions in foreign correspondence. Yet each fragment tells of a system of governance, a structure of authority, and a legacy that persisted beyond personal renown. The political landscape of the ancient world was fluid. Borders shifted through marriage, war, and diplomacy. Rulers rose and fell not only through conquest, but through internal challenges, succession crises, and natural disasters. Maintaining authority required constant negotiation with elites, military commanders, and religious authorities. Stability was never guaranteed, yet some kings succeeded in creating durable systems that allowed cities and empires to thrive for decades, or even centuries. Understanding these rulers requires attention to both the grand and the granular. A king's impact might be seen in the scale of city walls, the efficiency of irrigation canals, or the consistency of trade standards. Administrative records, even when fragmentary, reveal priorities and policies. Military campaigns, when documented, illustrate strategic thinking and resource management rather than mere spectacle. These rulers were practical architects of order in a world defined by unpredictability. And their legacies, though often uncelebrated, formed the backbone of subsequent civilizations. As this exploration unfolds, it becomes clear that the ancient world was not only a collection of famous names and celebrated dynasties, it was also the realm of countless rulers who governed quietly, efficiently, and effectively. They may not have captured the imagination of chroniclers or storytellers, but their decisions shaped cities, economies, and societies. Their influence, though muted in popular memory, laid the foundation for political, cultural, and social structures that echo through history and that continue to affect the modern world in ways both visible and subtle. The lands governed by these forgotten kings were as varied as the rulers themselves. River valleys offered fertile soil and reliable water, allowing agricultural surpluses that supported growing populations and centralized authority. In contrast, highlands and arid regions demanded careful resource management, often requiring sophisticated systems of irrigation, storage, and transport. Geography dictated the limits and opportunities of power. Natural barriers provided defense, trade routes created wealth, and proximity to rival states brought constant political tension. Climate played a central role in shaping ancient governance. Seasonal floods or droughts could devastate crops, forcing kings to intervene through rationing, redistribution, or infrastructure projects. Understanding the land's rhythms was essential. Mismanagement could quickly lead to unrest or rebellion. In some regions, shifting rivers or encroaching deserts changed the very location of cities over decades, forcing rulers to adapt continuously or abandon long-established centers of administration. Political conditions were equally complex. Many rulers operated within networks of vassals, city councils, religious authorities, and neighboring kingdoms. Authority was rarely absolute. Kings needed to negotiate power, assert dominance, and cultivate loyalty through both policy and ceremony. Diplomacy was a daily task, not only with foreign powers, but also within domestic structures where elites controlled local resources and populations. A ruler's ability to maintain cohesion often determined whether their reign would endure or vanish from memory. Trade and cultural exchange further defined the environment. Routes spanning rivers, deserts, and seas enabled the movement of goods, ideas, and technologies. Cities flourished where access to these networks was secured and managed, allowing rulers to accumulate wealth, patronize artisans, and fund monumental projects. At the same time, exposure to outside influences could introduce instability, requiring kings to balance openness with protection of local traditions and authority. Military considerations were inseparable from geography. Fortifications followed natural contours, rivers, hills, cliffs, while armies adapted strategies to terrain. Kings needed not only combat prowess, but the foresight to deploy resources efficiently, maintain supply lines, and anticipate environmental challenges. Those who succeeded could defend their realms effectively. Those who failed often disappeared from the historical record. Ultimately, the environmental and social context of these ancient rulers shaped their decisions and legacies. Their authority was inseparable from the land, climate, and populations they governed. By studying the physical and political landscapes of their reigns, historians can reconstruct the challenges they faced, the solutions they implemented, and the systems they left behind. Remnants of power that endured long after their names were forgotten. Imagine a deserted city square, sun-bleached and quiet, where marketplaces once thrived and royal decrees were read aloud to attentive citizens. The temples are roofless now, columns fractured, yet the imprint of governance remains in the layout of streets, the remnants of walls, and the carefully planned distribution of water. No statues commemorate the kings who ruled here, yet their decisions about trade, law, and agriculture still ripple through the land. Across mountains and valleys, similar traces appear. Roads connecting distant towns, fortified walls echoing strategic foresight, irrigation channels preserving crops through generations. These are the silent signatures of rulers who prioritized stability over spectacle, administration over legend. In studying these remains, a pattern emerges. The true measure of power is not in fame, but in the durability of structures, systems, and societal order. The paradox of the forgotten kings lies in their invisibility. They shaped empires and communities, yet history remembered only fragments. Their influence, subtle but enduring, reminds us that legacy is often more than monuments or recorded names. It is the lasting effect of decisions, policies, and governance. As archaeologists uncover more traces of these rulers, new questions arise. How many civilizations bear the mark of forgotten leaders whose names will never be known? How much of modern society rests on foundations they established, silently guiding progress for centuries? These questions invite reflection on memory itself, what survives, what is lost, and how understanding the invisible architects of the past can reshape our perception of history. In the end, the image of an empty plaza, sun casting long shadows across crumpled stone, is both haunting and enlightening. It is a reminder that even when names vanish, the work of leadership endures. And for every king forgotten, their influence persists, quiet, unseen, and inextricable from the story of civilization itself.